Hi there, welcome to another episode of the Bonsai Stuff podcast. As always, it's me, Scott Martin from Bonsai Matsu. Thank you for your company, love it as always, and happy spring. As my dad always says, every 1st of September, I always get a message from him saying, spring is sprung, the grass is riz. So it's that time of the year where we can start hopefully putting away repotting tools. You might, depending on where you are, you might have a little bit longer left to work, but for me, I'm going to talk a little bit more about repotting, but I'm definitely right at the very end. I've finished all mine. My repotting is well and truly finished, tucked away, locked away. A lot of trees have been moved back out after their rest period to where they should be. Still a few more to move over the next few weeks that were later repots than the earlier stuff. But with the change of season always comes this turbulent time for us, especially in Melbourne, where we are in Melbourne, Australia. I find that the change, especially towards spring, we get a lot of strong winds. And we had a storm roll through most of southern Australia and mid Australia as well, up towards Canberra and lower parts of Sydney, where the winds and the cold were hideous. What a way to finish winter. It's a nice way to say goodbye to it for another year. It was disastrous. It knocked over lots of trees around the streets around the neighbourhood, but luckily I tied down a lot of my stuff. I have had messages from people that have had things blown off benches, and I'm not surprised. I saw a report where the winds were 115 k's an hour, which is quite fierce. The intensity of these storms that roll through now just seem to be getting worse and worse. But anyway, change of season. We're on to spring now. So with this episode, I thought I'd just have a quick chat about wrapping up repotting, my learnings from repotting, some things that I can put away for next year and think about later on. And then as we get into the early part of spring, I'm going to start talking about a deciduous program. And this is thanks to a mate of mine, Neil, over in the West, who prompted me a little while ago saying it'd be great to get something that would sort of, program out the schedule for what I do with deciduous and how to look after them, how to maintain them. And there's a lot to deciduous and their development. So it'll be thinking, how could I make this a short half-hour talk, but I don't think it's possible. There's just too much to yabber on about. So there will be more coming out definitely about deciduous and the maintenance programs and things to think of when you are working with your trees, and not to go into an automatic mode. I really don't like that with any trees or any approach. And that's where I love bonsai books, and I love seeing things on Facebook or social media, but you've got to make your own interpretation, your own analysis, and understand the why you're doing it. That's the difficult part, not the how to or the technique for it, but it's when and why you're applying something to your trees, to your bonsai, no matter what they are. So I'll go through that in a roundabout way with deciduous, and then obviously you need to apply that to your own climate, your own backyard, your own collection, and see what we can develop. But anyway, for now, let's have a little wrap up on repotting for 2025. Repotting. I'm going to start with the first one. Repotting's hard, and that's not just because you get older every year and things seem to weigh more and take longer and whatever else, but it's difficult. Like it's a thought process that can mess with you at any stage. Like I'll give you two scenarios, two different trees. One is a black pot tree that you're putting into a bonsai pot for the first time. You've got to make some tough decisions. Like you're working on nabari, the root ball might come apart nice and easily, but how much soil do you take off? Do you cut that root? Do you keep that root? Is that root significant? Like, is it going to make a massive impact to the tree by removing it? And it's tough. It's not easy, and I get it. It's one of these things that you sort of go through the process over years and years and years, and you build up more confidence with it, knowing, yes, I've got to leave that root alone. No, I can cut that root off, or this nabari, that wrapping root that goes around there. Do I get rid of it now? Do I, wait a little bit longer? What's the process for it? And one of the things with wrapping roots, if you've just finished repotting and you're listening to this going, yeah, I left a wrapping root around the trunk and I'm not happy about it. It doesn't look good, but I needed it because the tree would have suffered too much without it. Little tip for you that I use. with those wrapping roots, first time, yep, if you have to, then leave it alone. Don't touch it. I come back to that tree in autumn and remove it. So give the tree a good 6 months of growing new roots in my potting mix, going through my feeding regime, going through everything, watering, all the stuff that I do with it, the maintenance, the pest and disease, the fungal issues program. So this tree is getting stronger and stronger and stronger. Then when autumn comes around, I can depending on, there's provisos with this that you're not going to remove the entire root system by getting rid of this root. But if it's a small to medium sized root, then around autumn is the time that I will get that tree and I'll cut that wrapping root off. Couple of reasons for it. One, you've grown a whole heap of new roots. That's obviously the main one. But the second is that the tree's also going to start swelling during that autumn period as it sort of tucks away the resources. And that wrapping root can often leave a little bit of a scar there. So I don't want it to get any worse than what it is. So I'll go in at the autumn period and I'll lop that off. But so on one side of repotting, you've got this tree that's first going into a bonsai pot. You're going to make all these tough decisions. The second is that you've had a tree that's been in a bonsai pot forever. Like it's been in a good mix. It's grown fine fibrous roots and it becomes a solid brick. Like, it's been in there 2, 3, 4 years, whatever it is that you've kept it in the pot. Sure, your decision-making process is very different. You're not thinking about, is it right to cut this off? Is it right to cut that off? But it's physically hard work because your root system is so fine and so solid that it actually takes a lot of work. And I've talked about it previously about, working with a slab of concrete or a brick with a little rake and how hard it can be. But you've got to think and you've got to work very quickly on your feet. You've only got a limited time when you've got the tree sitting in out of the pot waiting to go into the new pot. So you've got to, repotting's hard. I get it. It's physically hard. It's demanding, and that's what leads me into the next one. Is I always make sure that during repotting season I've got plenty of painkillers because it's just this bloody carpal tunnel RSI thing seems to go on when you repot so many trees. It's not unusual to repot 10, 15, 20 trees in a 5-6 hour session, and you multiply that day after day after day, and sort of the number of trees that you repot through a couple of month period starts to stack up. And I pride myself on being thorough and quick and efficient, and knowing that there's an alarm clock ready to ring saying, hey, this tree's been out of the pot. You can't overwork these roots. You can't take hours to work on each tree because all the root system starts to dry out and starts to die. So you've got to be efficient with it. So having some really good painkillers around the way, it helps you sleep at night, I can guarantee you. The other is you've got to have a good hand cleaner. I'm looking at my hands now while I'm doing this, and I don't know, it just seems to be dirt embedded into the pores of my hands, and it gets a bit much. I wear gloves. I'm always professed to wearing gloves, and you should always wear gloves and be safety conscious when you are repotting. But yeah, working with the grit that we do, the pumice and the scoria, I do anyway in the mix. It's pretty destructive stuff. It doesn't take long to wear down your tools. If anyone bought a new sickle at the start of the repotting season, I'm sure you'll look at it now and think, oh, that's stuffed. Well, mine is anyway. I've rolled through 2 or 3 of the things throughout this season, and they're all flat. I can't tell which one's the new one because they're all filthy, and there's definitely no bevel, no blade on, no serrated teeth on the saw whatsoever. But I think with repotting, having a deadline, like for me, I've made it really clear. July repotting for me is traditionally my, the second last month of winter, depending on where you are, is normally for me in my climate is my deciduous. And the last month of winter is my conifers, pines, junipers, all that sort of stuff, cedars. So having those windows for me, sure, they can stretch. It's not fixed. It's not hard and fast. And depending on the weather, things, maybe you've got a bit longer to do things. Maybe you've got a little bit less. It changes year to year. So you've got to let things flex. But in my mind, I look at those 2 months and lock away all other jobs that I've got to do for my trees and say, okay, now just focus on this. Don't get distracted. Don't get drawn away by wanting to wire or shape or style. That's all done. That's my May and June period. I'll look at the last part of autumn, first part of winter that's my prime time for conifers to do the work on them. I look at this latter part of spring, of winter, like very early spring, is where we start getting into doing some, maybe some deciduous pruning as they're waking up. If I hadn't done it already in the early mid part of autumn, that's sort of the window that I work with for the work that I've got to do. So I know that when I come to repotting, I've got to be firm. I've got to hold fast, and I've got to say that's it. So if it means long days, if it means late nights, if it means early starts to get them done, then I find that as a really good motivator for me to say, you've got to get it done. You've got to knuckle down. You've got to get through your trees. You can't miss this window. Repotting. Honestly, I've said it about a million times on the podcast, and I say it even more when I talk with people. But repotting is, if not the most important thing we do with our trees, I was going to say that might be up there with the most important, but I reckon it's by far, repotting and watering. Without each of those done at the right time, your trees are pretty much stuffed. Fertilising is really, really important as well. But to survive, our trees need to be repotted, and it's got to be done well. And when you do it right, once you get over that initial fear of cutting the root system on a tree, once you see the results, once you get on the treadmill, on the program of how this is going to work for your trees, there's no looking back. And the first one is daunting. Taking out of black pots is always, pretty scary stuff at the start. But once you start getting that fine fibrous root system, once you start seeing how they react to that open mix, once you start seeing, the fertilizing work and the new growth, and your check boxes start going, yeah, tick, 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 I'm achieving all my goals that I've set for myself. You're probably overachieving in a lot of areas. Repotting becomes one of those things that you jump into. Like I seriously look forward to it. This time of now it's done. Now my repotting's over as we sort of tick into the first day of spring when this podcast comes out. I look back and say, thank Christ, thank God it's over. I'm done. I'm sick of it. But in those last couple of weeks before repotting starts, I start getting really excited and looking at the trees, the angle changes, the potential, and looking at development plans, and say, it's been 3 years since I've done this tree. Like, I'm really looking forward to giving it a real good boost, a good kick along. Like, it's probably the growth rates tapered a little bit off. It's got a little bit slower. It's refined a little bit, but just to see that rejuvenation and jumping the gun as it comes out into spring period. I walk around the yard now, and it's beautiful. Like, it's a great thing to see. Buds are all opening. There's flowers around the garden. There's flowers around, street trees. Everything's starting to come back to life again. Things that were empty shells. In another month's time, you're going to be chasing your tail trying to keep up with the pruning work that's getting done on these things. But it's very exciting, and that's where, for me, I turn around at that time and look at the trees that I've repotted, and I give myself a bit of a pat on the back. I very rarely like to stand there and, sit back and smoke a cigar and say, hey, well done. But after repotting, seeing everything come back to life again, that's the time that I sort of draw a breath and look at it and go, that's great. It's really good. It's reassuring. What you've done means you've got to keep going. You've got to stay on the path with repotting. And next year when it comes around, use this time right now as the motivator to say, that's what I'm aiming for. That's my goal. That's what I want to do. That's what I want to achieve. Like every year when spring gets here, I want the trees to keep going forward. Start of the year, episode 1 this year, I said my main goal was to ensure that every single tree in my collection takes a step forward. And repotting, if there's nothing else that happens with, some of the trees that are in development, or cuttings that I've taken, or seeds that I've planted, that I know that when I repot them, I can check that box and go, yep, that tree is taking a step forward because of something that I've done. It's not just taking a step forward because of, it's getting water and food. It's taking a step forward because I've applied myself, I've repotted it, I'm working on that engine of the tree to make sure that it's going to keep taking leaps and bounds forward in the years to come. And you know what? A little pat on the back every now and then doesn't hurt, I can tell you. When I was going through writing notes for this podcast, the first thing when I thought, let's do a wrap up. What lessons on repotting? Like, what have you I try and refocus on things that are good, things that I've done well, things that I could probably improve. Be honest with yourself. Have you done things always right? And the first note that I made was, do it right now for the future. And that's so true. That runs through my head, not only with repotting, but sort of everything that applies to your bonsai. Doing things now might take a little longer, like the 4-way tie-in as opposed to just doing it as a 3-way. Yeah, look, you'll get away with a 3-way, or just crisscrossing the wires over the Nabari. Like, do you really need to stuff around and do a 4-way tie-in? Takes you a little bit longer. It takes practice. You've got to get this right. Is it worth doing it? Do you really get, is it going to make a big difference, or will I get away with it? Sure, you get away with it, but for me, it's always about the future repercussions of doing something or not doing something. With the windstorm I just talked about at the start, this change of season, wake up in the morning, terrified, like thinking, what's going to happen when I open the curtains? That felt like it sounded like in the middle of the night the trees were bashing around, like garden trees. And, thinking, what am I going to wake up to? Has something come down and smashed another apex off a tree? Or, is there going to be, some disaster I need to get help with or whatever? Or are the bonsai going to be okay? Like, had I tied them all down properly? Is everything going to be okay? And this is where I think that application of your dedication to looking after your trees sort of comes off. Like I said, I was nervous, walked outside. Not one garden tree had dropped a branch, thank God. So that was all good. But I had a tree which had been taken out. It was a little bit sicker than what I'd liked last year. So I thought I'm going to put it back into a grow pot. Gets into the grow pot, and it's commonplace with grow pots that you might think, why would I tie it in? Why would I bother tying a tree into a grow pot? Like it's a grow pot. Just put it in there, let the thing take off and whatever. It's not a bonsai, so it's probably not the best tree you've got on the bench. Why would you waste resources and time on a tree that's in a black pot? Anyway, that's not my approach. My approach is always tie your trees in no matter what they're in, as much as you possibly can. Whatever technique you have to use, anything's better than nothing. But with this tree, Californian oak it was, I'd taken it and I did a 4-way tie-in through a plastic pot. So I made sure this root ball was securely tied in. Tree went into a sheltered area, reasonably sheltered, because it needed to recover, and it's got shade cloth on one side, shade cloth on the top, and anyway, the wind got in, and the only tree that was knocked off my bench was this oak. And when it was on the ground, I walked out there and went, of all trees, like the tree that's probably not doing the best in the yard, had to be that one. But I thought that's not a bad result. Only one tree that was knocked over in the whole storm. That's pretty good. Of all the hundreds and hundreds of trees that are floating around the joint, some of the big buggers that are tied on, like all the tie-ins worked. I'd done everything that was my job to do for the trees. So I get over, pick up this tree, expecting the worst. It's tied in. It's tight. It's like a wheel nut. It's done up so tight that this tree and all the soil that was underneath the root system was still intact. So when I looked at it, some of the new surface roots had been damaged that had started to grow, but stand the pot up straight, get some new soil mix, tap it in, tie it down on the bench like I probably should have done in the first place. That's the only part I let myself down and the tree down with. I didn't tie it down. But the tree was nice and secure because I'd spent the time, spent the extra minute and applied the extra effort when I was repotting it to make sure that it was done for the future. Now, I didn't think the future would come, sort of 3-4 weeks down the track when it was put back out on the bench and a storm came through. But that's exactly why it's the unforeseen things that make me do that little bit extra when it comes to trees. I was I work at a school and I teach bonsai to some Year 9 boys, or Form 3, wherever you are around the world, but they're sort of about the 14, 15 year old, and it's their first experience with bonsai. And I could, as part of the process, when it gets to repotting time for these trees, I could easily just put in one wire, tie it on, and go, there you go, see you later, take it home, whatever. But I don't. I try and do the 4-way tie-in every single time that I work on those trees, because I want to show them that there's a technique to doing this, and this is the minimum expectation. Like the standards, I've said it before, the standards you set for yourself are the standards you'll keep. And I think that if you can do, no matter where, I'm focusing on repotting now, but this applies to everything that I do with bonsai. It's always about, taking that extra little bit of care, taking that little bit of time. When you go to prune your scissors, make sure they're clean. Make sure they're sharp. Don't just pick up the scissors, cut them and put them back and go, yeah, whatever, job's done. It's a second later. Bonsai is all about the fine detail. It's all about the beauty of the process. The end tree is somewhere down the track. I thoroughly believe that. It's all about the process that we go through to get there. It's the journey, and making sure that when we do tie things in, they're beautiful, because it's for the future benefit of the tree. No matter what stage it's at, whether it's in a black pot or it's going into a 14 grand antique Chinese pot, whatever it is, it's still got to go through the same process as far as I'm concerned. Now, the next note that I'd written too, now mind you, I've been through 2 months of repotting, shagged. I'm buggered. My hands are sore. I get bloody numb hands throughout the night where I can't feel them. It's just repetitive work. It's hard work. my next note says small trees are great, and that's so true. Like I love the big trees. Like the big trees have got that the majestic nature about them. You look at them and they always take the chocolates. You walk through your yard and you go, oh, that's such a beautiful tree. You forego issues with structure. The grandness of the tree sort of draws you in. It does get said to me, sometimes are they too big to be bonsai? It's like, nah, they're never too big to be bonsai. But when it comes to repotting, especially towards the latter half of the repotting season for me, I start looking at little trees going, geez, that's nice. Little trees are so much easier, but, they're far more complex. I think they're far more technical in how you look after them. And often, a lot of people steer away from the small trees because they're so bloody hard to maintain and so hard to keep alive and so hard to get the structural balance right. And every little flaw is magnified because it's such a small tree, and, millimeters make such a big difference on a little tree, whereas, you can be 10, 20 centimetres on a big tree, and it's no big deal. If you get a bit of a elongation on a branch and before the foliage kicks in on a large tree, whatever, it's no big deal. You get it on a tiny little tree that's, maybe 10, 12 centimetres tall, and it stands out and really, really makes a big difference to the structure of that tree. But when you're repotting them, it's such a quick job. Cut a couple of light wires, retie them on, you're sort of fiddling with them around your hands. You're not, having to walk around this tree and tie it in, and you got a tiny little scoop of soil to put in there, and you're pressing things down. It's like, how good's this? Oh, I love them. I love the little trees, and I do give myself a break every now and then when I'm repotting, and I'll bunch together the little trees. On a day when I wake up and I'm, particularly exhausted, and I'm thinking, oh God, that was a hard day yesterday, I'll just focus on the little trees. It's like, you feel great. You can get through 30 trees in a day, maybe more. And it's like, how's that? I did 30 trees. Each tree doesn't take very long because they're so bloody small, but I still put the same effort into them. But I find that I finish the day and I'm not quite so exhausted from it all. And the last one for this repotting recap, last note I wrote for myself, and this is only a recent addition. It was the last thing that got added. There's a bit of a story to it, is when you think it's over, it's not. I'd started finishing my repotting workshops. I'd definitely finished all of my trees. I'd ticked some boxes. I'd been around my yard, triple checked everything. Went, yeah, that's looking good. And then all of a sudden you get a phone call. Oh, Scott, I really need repotting done. Like, oh, it's right at the end. How the tree's looking. No, the buds are swelling, but I need you urgently. It's like, righto. So you drag out all the repotting tools and you're off and you're doing last minute things. But for me, it's like a massive collection that's got, hundreds of trees. So you're looking around the yard going, well, there's probably 3 or 4 days solid at least, working flat out. And you'd only scratch the surface, repotting trees that hadn't been repotted for in excess of 5 years. And it's, it's not over until it's well and truly over. So normally about now, I'd be saying to you, make sure you get your repotting tools, give them a good clean, sharpen them up, make sure all the dirt's off them, give them a spray with WD-40 or something, lubricate them, put a bit of light oil on them, tuck them away nice and neat. Make sure that the wrap that they're in or the box or whatever it is, there's no moisture in it. Don't want to get rust on your tools, but make sure that everything's done nice and neatly and put them away, because you're not going to use them now until somewhere in the future. Make sure they're perfect. So when you get them out, leave them as you want to find them. Golden rule for me with my tools, but unfortunately for me, that's not the case. I look in the workshop over my shoulder where I'm recording the podcast, and I can see my repotting gloves that I'm wearing for this season still wet, hanging up on the drying rack, trying to dry for tomorrow when I'm back out on the tools doing more repotting. So when you think it's over, it's generally not, but. Like this is probably the last time I'm going to say this. If you can do a whip around your yard now, I know it's the start of spring. It might be too late where you are, but just have a look, because if there's a tree that needs repotting, just see whether you can get it done. It makes such a big difference. You've got one last opportunity to make sure that the trees in your yard are done. Summer's only around the corner. And if the forecasts are anything to go by, then they're talking a long, hot, dry summer. It's going to be stressful for our trees, and think about that now. When it's cold and wet and windy outside, all I can think about really is summer. And part of the future plan for me is to look and review sprinkler system. Things deteriorate, things expire, things change around the yard. So that's all part of the future. But for me, really, it's thinking now about that engine of the tree and what we need to do to make sure that it's going to be not only able to survive what's coming around the corner, it's to thrive, to maintain where it's at through that crappy hot period that comes along. And if you're over in the west of Australia, last year was hideous. It was such a long, hot, dry one. Ours was quite mild, and I'm thinking that if, we've been lulled into a false sense of security in Melbourne where we've had some quite nice summers, haven't been too hot, no extremes really, a couple here, a couple there, a couple of spikes with warm weather. But, if we get a prolonged hot, dry period, you've got a tree that hasn't been repotted for quite a period of time, that's not going to be taking the water in. It's a stressful time. You really don't want to get to that point where your trees get that weakened state, and then you get pests start coming in and flogging them as well. You really want to make sure that you're ready to go now. So this is your last chance, and like I said, when you think it's over, it's not. So for a wrap up on the podcast, I just want to talk about coming into the start of spring. So a few things you got to do around the yard as well with your trees. So with the start of spring comes, fertilising. It's starting already. It feels like I've just taken the tea bags off the trees for autumn, and they're about to go back on again, fresh. So for me, and this is different for everybody. Everyone has to make their own judgment on it. But I'll just let you know what I'm doing, so you can then think about it through your mind. And I'll talk more about fertilising through the deciduous sort of next 2 or 3 podcasts, however long it takes to get through, with the strategies for that in the coming weeks. But for me, my main aim at this time of the year with fertilising is to give the trees post-repotting about a month. All right, so if you've just finished repotting something, give it about a month after repotting before you start fertilising, okay? Let the roots all establish, let them get going, let the tree recover, catch its breath. You don't want any fertiliser burn to happen on those trees. So just back off. Don't, give them about a month after repotting to fertilise. But for me, it's, taking that situation out, for me, it's go time for fertilising developmental trees that are sort of starting to push along. Get into those nice and early. Pines, especially black pines, where I'm going to be decandling later on in the year. Fertilise those nice and early. Get their strength up as much as you possibly can. There'll be talk about work on pines and stuff down the track, but for now, that's one of the main things that I'm doing. Start filling those tea bags up, or whatever method you're going to be using for fertilising, but get onto it. You don't want to miss this early part of spring. Harnessing the growth in spring is really, it's fundamental to developing your trees. Fundamental to saying, do I let this grow or do I cut it? Do I fertilise it and really push it along? And if you miss the boat, it's going to be another 12 months before we get this rapid growth that comes along with spring. So I'd be on that. The other thing that I am very conscious of at the moment is, with all that beautiful lush foliage that's just starting to appear, that is a Monty for pests. If you just keep an eye on it, no matter what you're doing. And how you want to treat pests, it's entirely up to you. But I am mindful now that I don't want that beautiful spring growth for shoots that maybe I want to extend. I don't want the tip of those taken off now by aphids. I don't want them weakened. I want to make sure that I'm on the front foot. So this is a time I'm really, really mindful of pests, and I'm on the front foot with them always. I'll never let those buggers get the jump on me. But I'm also mindful of possums around the yard, and I've had so many reports lately of possums that are getting very hungry as they get into this early spring period or start of spring, and they've eaten cedars, they've eaten pines, they're just eating anything at the moment. They're on a rampage, the rotten bloody things. So that fresh new foliage, if you've got your trees anywhere near a fence or anywhere that a possum can get to, just be very careful, because they are absolute beasts at this time of the year, and they'll go for the easy stuff before all the foliage comes out on the garden trees around the yard. So just be really, really on top of it for fertilising. Get going. Watch the watering. Start upping it now. Like as these trees start to take off and start to go, you'll start finding that you're increasing the watering to roughly once a day on a consistent basis. Forget winter's doors just shut. So your focus on watering now is not to think about the colder weather. Think about how the trees are growing and how they're taking that water up and how they're transpiring. Don't let that new foliage on deciduous trees start to wilt. If you see it starting to wilt, it's too long between watering. Start increasing the frequency. Use that as a telltale for you. Don't let it get to that point where your trees are being damaged. And if you're using the tea bag method of fertilising, watering is great too, because it allows you to get the fertiliser into the trees. You need water on those tea bags for the trees to be able to access it. So up that, watch out for the pests, and make sure that you come up with a plan of what we're going to be doing with the pruning process on your deciduous. So like I said, coming up, thanks to Neil in Western Australia, we're going to be talking about deciduous and development plans and my thought process when it comes to pruning and developing them over the next couple of weeks. So hope you're excited about that. I'm excited to talk about it. Deciduous are one of my favourite species. They definitely put a smile on my dial more than most, because they are such a long game, such a process to work your way through. Your natives, your pines, they all develop really, really quickly. Deciduous, it's you get reward for very long-term consistent work on them. So we'll get into that from next week. Give your trees a cuddle for me. Until next time, as always, happy bonsai.